Imagine LeBron James as the American Ronaldo, or Nate Robinson locking down NFL receivers instead of dunking over giants. Far-fetched? Maybe. But some NBA stars nearly chase touchdowns instead of jump shots. Charlie Ward is the first name that comes up whenever this conversation starts, and for good reason. Back in 1993, he wasn't just a quarterback, he was the quarterback in college football. Ward led Florida State to its first ever national championship, collected the Heisman Trophy, the Davey O'Brien Award, and basically every honor a college quarterback could dream of. On Saturday afternoons in Tallahassee, he was untouchable. The NFL draft came around, and you'd think teams would be drooling to get him. But Ward made it clear, if he wasn't taken in the first round, he wouldn't risk his future in football, and NFL teams hesitated. So while the league stalled, another door swung open. Ward had also spent 4 years playing basketball at Florida State, quietly stacking school records in steals and assists. The New York Knicks took a chance on him in the first round of the 1994 NBA draft. And just like that, the Heisman-winning quarterback became a point guard at Madison Square Garden. He didn't just survive, he thrived. Over 11 NBA seasons, mostly with the Knicks, Ward earned respect for his steady playmaking and tough defense. And the irony never gets old. The man who once ran an offense on the football field ended up running offenses on the hardwood instead. If Ward's story was steady and calculated, Nate Robinson's was pure fire. Everyone remembers him as the little guy who defied gravity, the 5'9" point guard who dunked over Dwight Howard and won 3 slam dunk contests. But rewind the clock, and Nate was a football player first. At the University of Washington, he came in on a football scholarship, lining up at cornerback. His freshman season wasn't just symbolic, he actually started 6 games. His speed and instincts made him a natural, but basketball kept tugging at him. By his sophomore year, he hung up the helmet for good, choosing instead to chase hoops. That decision gave us one of the most electric point guards of the 2000s. Nate proved that raw athleticism doesn't care what sport you put it in, it translates. Then there's Darrell Armstrong, the overlooked but no less fascinating member of this trio. At Fayetteville State, Armstrong wasn't even a basketball star at first. He was a walk-on kicker for the football team. One of his kicks, a 47-yard field goal, stood as a school record for years. But Armstrong wasn't meant to be remembered as just a kicker. He switched over to basketball, where the grind was brutal. He went undrafted, bounced through minor leagues, and had every reason to quit. But he never did. That persistence paid off. Armstrong clawed his way to the NBA and stayed there for 14 seasons. He wasn't just a roster filler either. He won both Most Improved Player and 6th Man of the Year in 1999, becoming a fan favorite for his relentless energy. Armstrong's story might not have the glamour of Ward's Heisman or Robinson's dunks, but it might be the most relatable. A man who started as a kicker, switched sports, and through sheer determination, made it big. Now only 3 players ever balanced the brutal grind of college football with the path to the NBA, but plenty of others flirted with the game long before making their basketball mark. In fact, some of the league's biggest names were stars on the football field even before they stepped onto a college campus. And honestly, looking at some of these names, you can't help but wonder, what if they had stayed with football instead? LeBron James is the most famous what if of them all. Before he became the king, he was the nightmare wide receiver no high school defensive back wanted to face. At St. Vincent St. Mary in Akron, Ohio, LeBron made first-team All-State as just a sophomore, hauling in passes with the same mix of size and agility he now uses to bulldoze NBA defenses. By his junior year, he had led his team to the state semifinals, and football coaches across the country were drooling. Former Cleveland Browns coach Eric Mangini once said he'd have signed LeBron on the spot, and Ohio State's Jim Tressel admitted he dreamed about James suiting up for the Buckeyes. But LeBron's path was already written on the basketball court. He never played another down after high school, trading touchdowns for triple-doubles. Still, it's hard not to imagine him as an NFL Pro Bowler, maybe even one of the greatest tight ends or receivers the league had ever seen. But of course, he chose basketball, and the rest is history. Glenn Big Baby Davis tells a different kind of story. Long before he was throwing his weight around in the paint for LSU or the Boston Celtics, he was flattening opponents on the football field in Baton Rouge. At 6'9" and pushing 300 pounds, he lined up at defensive tackle and sometimes even tailback. Just picture that, a man the size of a fridge charging at you with a football in his hands. Coaches thought he could have been a dominant force on the gridiron, but Davis had other ideas. He gave up tackling quarterbacks and breaking through offensive lines to chase rebounds and set screens instead. That choice paid off, as he became an NCAA standout. an NBA role player, and a champion with Boston in 2008. Still, it's fun to imagine him as the ultimate NFL fullback, clearing space and dragging defenders down the field. Ben Wallace is another one whose story could have gone in a completely different direction. In high school, he wasn't just a basketball player, he was an all-state athlete in multiple sports, football included. Auburn University even offered him a football scholarship, with visions of him becoming a two-way player who could dominate on both offense and defense. With his frame and intensity, you can imagine him flattening running backs or chasing down quarterbacks. But Wallace didn't want to give up basketball. He turned the offer down, chose the hardwood, and eventually fought his way into the NBA as an undrafted rookie. The rest is history. 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, an NBA championship in 2004, and a reputation as the backbone of the Detroit Pistons' go-into-work era. Sometimes saying no to football meant rewriting NBA history. David Knoll's path was less decorated, but no less interesting. Growing up in Durham, North Carolina, he was a standout wide receiver, the kind of athlete who drew serious looks from college football recruiters. He initially committed to play football at the University of North Carolina, but somewhere along the way, the pull of basketball won out. Noel walked onto UNC's hoops team, and by his sophomore season he had earned a scholarship. He ended up playing a key role on the 2005 Tar Heel squad that won the NCAA championship, and a year later, he was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round. His NBA career wasn't long, but his journey from almost football player to NCAA champion shows just how thin the line can be between one sport and another. John Havlicek is one of those names that feels untouchable in basketball history. 8-time NBA champion, Celtics legend, Hall of Famer, he's woven into the fabric of the game itself. But roll the clock back to 1962, and his future wasn't quite so certain. Havlicek was drafted by both the Boston Celtics in the NBA and the Cleveland Browns in the NFL. He actually showed up to Browns training camp, ran drills, and gave the NFL a serious look. Imagine the dynasty that never happens if he'd stuck with football. No Hondo sprinting the floor, no iconic Celtics banners raised in the Garden with his fingerprints on them. Instead, maybe it's Cleveland fans telling stories about the wide receiver who became a star. In the end, basketball won out, and the Celtics' golden era was all the richer for it. Then there's Danny Ainge, a man who could do just about anything. In high school, he pulled off the impossible. First-team All-American in football, basketball, and baseball. That's not made-up stuff, it's true. 3 different sports and 1 player. He went on to play professional baseball with the Toronto Blue Jays while still in college, then decided his best path was on the hardwood. The Boston Celtics scooped him up, and Ainge spent 14 years in the NBA, winning 2 championships and earning a reputation as one of the league's fiercest competitors. He never played football beyond high school, but with that kind of pedigree, you can't help but wonder if he might have thrived there too. His story is less about what if and more about how much talent can one person really have. Only Charlie Ward, Nate Robinson, and Darrell Armstrong actually balanced college football with NBA careers, but plenty of others brushed against that path. LeBron James terrorized high school defenses, Glenn Davis bulldozed lines in Baton Rouge, Ben Wallace turned down a football scholarship, David Knoll flipped from the gridiron to hoops, Havlicek nearly joined the Browns, and Danny Ainge excelled in every sport he touched. Each choice shaped not just their lives, but the NBA we know today. Which of these players do you think would have thrived most in the NFL?